So how to join the binding? Lay it straight. Okay, lay this one straight towards you, right sides together. So I've got my right side up and my right side down together. Okay, now this is where I just have to, it's not difficult, but I want this to be in a straight line. So I fold my fabric and make a crease. And then I line it up. It's the way I do it. Otherwise it always comes out not quite right. Did you see that? So I put that across, that down. Just put a little bit up for the minute. I want it to go so it's in a straight line. So I fold it across and then I get the lines to match up the top. And then I get the corner, the line to match up at the bottom. So I've jiggled that. Open it up, hold it, I hold it, and then I'll pin it. Now you can go zoomp along on the sewing machine, zoomp, zoomp, and that's great. But I'm sitting here with you. So I'm going to just run along a few stitches. Let's just pin it though and see what happens. I've pinned it, I've opened it up, and it's a straight line. Can you see that? It's going to be straight. Okay, let me sew it and we'll see what happens. I'll sew it so you can see. I'm going to start right in the corner. So hopefully that will be my straight line. And you can rewind this if you want to see how to again. And we want to join all our 4 pieces into one long piece, and then we're going to fold it in half and iron it. And then it's going to bind our quilt. You could have a jazzy binding. If you've only got small scraps, I've done that on a scrappy quilt, just tiny pieces of fabric, just sewn them all together and made a long piece of binding. And it looks terrific. A few little stitches at the end. And you see, the reason I left that a little bit proud is because then you're not doing it to this corner, you're doing it there. Otherwise it's a bit, it can easily fray there. Let's see how this turned out. Good, isn't it? But starting a little bit lower down meant I didn't sew to that corner, which is, very vulnerable, it can easily fray. So I've made it to there. Now I'm going to cut that. Make sure you don't go through it all. And then you can just cut along there, cut that little bit off. Cut that little bit off, not too near the edge. I'm going to press that seam open with the iron when I come to press it in half. Now you can see how that seam is distributed across the fabric and not in one long piece. Like that. And now I've got a piece of binding the same with a spread seam. But I'm going to press those seams open, and I'm going to press all of the binding in half. Now you can see that seam, how it's spread across rather than one big dollop in the middle. So I'll go and press those open, and I'll press that in half, and I'll come back and show you what we're going to be doing. Obviously we're going to be binding the quilt, but how do you do it if you've never done it before? It's so simple when you know how. It's the same with anything, isn't it? I'll see you in a minute. I've pressed the binding in half. Let's see where there's a join. Here's the join. Oh, you can see how it's spread, can't you? And I'm going to start about here, putting the tape. I put the tape just a little bit away, just a fraction. Can you see that? And I keep it a fraction. I keep it that fraction away because we've got the two raw edges together. So when you do the binding, there'll be no raw edges, no tucking under. It's all done now. And I'm going to leave about that much flopping. We put a couple of pins in. Now I don't pull this tight. I don't pull on this and pull it tight because it can distort it. I've left this tail and I've left a little bit from the edge. Now you don't have to do that. That's my preference because I'm going to turn this over and I like to fill this. It gives it a little bit of something in it, if you see what I mean. So that's how I'm going to sew it. I'm not going to hand sew it. I know some of you don't have a machine and you will be hand sewing it. So try and get your stitches not too big, as small as you can get them. But, you know, it'll be okay. So I'm going to sit and go round there before I do that, because then this edging will be sewn down and then obviously sewn there. So I'm going to sit and sew round here by hand because I'm hand quilting this. I'm just going to sew the binding on by machine. We've got bank holiday here in England this weekend, and the friend who wants to make a quilt desperately, well, she's never made anything. She is not a crafter, but yeah, she wants to, and she's coming to stay. So I'm hoping we can get some sewing done. Just threading a needle is quite something when you're not a crafter. We take it for granted. Oh yes, thread the needle, make the knot like this, put it through. But it's rather exciting when a new one is coming on board. It can change your life. And of course we're using the different side of the brain to the one that worries. So it's always good for us. So I'm just going straight along in the ditch. Do you remember I showed you yesterday? In the ditch. So it's quite easy. We don't need all that tape because I'm just going along this line here. And there we are. So I'm securing this bit down, making the edge. I could be doing this on my lap because the rest of the quilt is all held together. And one viewer said, yes, those tiny, tiny stitches, you know, 12 to the inch, used to be because the wadding was different. You know, the wadding was different then. Modern waddings, they say, can be quilted up to 10 inches, some of them. So up to 10 inches will hold something. We usually say in the quilting, a hand apart. And that's, look, that's exactly what that is. A hand apart, my lines. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good way. How close should I do it? Well, I showed you my quilts yesterday. They were 1/4 of an inch apart. But you can, you know, about a hand apart is I think the best if you're wanting to hold it down securely. If you don't want to quilt, I mean, some people, they go through, they pull up a couple of threads and then they tie a knot, and it's little ties that hold it all together. You could do that if you didn't want to quilt. That's an idea. And I did have someone remind me in the first video about taking a photo. When you lay out your pieces of fabric, take a photo of them. Then you're always you can put the photo up whilst you're quilting to check you've got the pieces in the right place. And also you can take the photo on black and white, because then that black and white image really makes things stand out differently, and you can see if one piece looks right against another, or if you like it jarring even. You know, who says things mustn't jar nowadays? Everything yes, it's what we want to do, isn't it? There used to be rules in quilting, but I think those rules have gone out the window now. Just do what you want. And the quilt that I'm finishing, I'll show you on my episodes. I showed you before, but it's out of the closet. I've hand embellished, you know, we've got beads and goodness knows what on it. So just enjoy. Here I am. I'm going to wrap that thread round my needle. I'm going to put it back in. Hold on to that. Push it back in and slide it out. Finger on knot. Pull it through. And there's a hidden knot sandwiched in between. Okay, so I'm going to just go round there, the other sides, and I'm going to sew on as I showed you, as I said. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop at the corner, and I'm going to show you how I carry on with the corner. Okay, so I started and left the long tail as I said I would. I left a bit on the edge as I said I would. I didn't, when you do it on the machine, you have to be careful that this is flat because it can easily pucker up. So keep it flat as you can. And there's the back. Now, I've done there. I've done my mitered corner. And if I check it, you can see that's a good mitre. Very simple. Again, you need to know how. There it is. Can you see that? There it is. A perfect mitre. Zuzunk. It's as easy as that. So I'm going to do one with you. I carried on round. I didn't pull it. I just laid it on and sewed it round gently. Another mitred corner. Checking these with you. Yes, that one's okay. If you follow how to do it, it should work each time. Here's my third one. Let's cut that. Yes, a perfect mitred corner. So I'm going to try and do a perfect mitred corner with you by hand, because yeah, it's perfectly okay to put this binding on by hand. It'll be a long line, but you know, that's all right. You can sit and sew. So I'm coming along here and I'm going to sew. Make sure this is flat. Make sure everything's flat. We're back to smoothing again, a little away from the edge. And then I just do a little back stitch. I do back stitch, a little running stitch, and then a back stitch. Little line of running stitches with some back stitches. Now I'm going to go to almost the corner, which is where I am. There. I'm going to do a couple of stitches. Now, if I was on the machine, I would lift my needle out of there and do this manoeuvre, but I'm doing it by hand, so it's a bit different, isn't it? I'm now going to, put my needle down. I've got this coming along left to right. I'm now going to take this piece of fabric, this edging, north to south, north. I'm taking it north. So I'm west to east, aren't I, obviously, because I've sewn that down. Now I'm going up north. I'm going up north. And can you see, I want that a little bit away because I leave a little edge, as I've said. I just make that lovely, lovely crease, yeah? I've come along, left to right, as I'm sewing, and now I've lifted my fabric, my binding up to the north, and I'm going to bring it back down south. Make sure this is all flat. Hold your finger. I've positioned it how I want it. Just a little bit away from the edge. And I've folded it back. I've put it really where I want it, but I've got this little tuck. So by hand, what I'm doing is I'm making sure this lines up with this and makes a nice corner. I'm making sure this lines up with this, and I've got this flap because I took it up and brought it down. If you want to watch that again, rewind, or shall I do it again? I'll do it again. Okay, so here I am. I've sewn along right to nearly the corner, right to nearly the edge. Left to right. I now go north. You can put your fabric right up there and make a nice crease. Yeah. And now I'm going to pull that back towards me. I've made a pleat, and the pleat, make sure you've got a nice square edge there. That's lining up with that line. And that line is going to line up with our stitches. So I put my needle back in and take my needle through to the back. And I'm going to sew got to try and make sure on my machine I know what line to line it up to. I'm doing this bit by hand. I've got to turn it round so I can do it. And I'm going to sew down here. I shall secure that well. You really need an overhead camera for all this teaching lark, don't you? But I'm a chatterbox, not a teacher. Okay, I'm just coming down this line. I'll show you as I do it. Now, when you do it by machine, you bump and you bump. And that's it. You may feel when you do it by hand that you want to put your needle through there and make a beautiful, I'm going to do that, although make a beautiful join. I'll do a bit more. Shall we open it up and see? That pleat is going to make the mitre. There it is. Perfect mitre. You may need to watch that again if you haven't done it before, and just arrange that with your thumb. And so you want this line to match up, that to work to a point. We don't need to sew that. And that's a quilter's mitre, just left. I'll show you what we're going to do with this in a minute. Happy? Now, the next bit, I shall finish this line and then I shall come back and show you what we do with these bits. Look, I was playing not yarn chicken, I was playing fabric chicken. That is exactly all I had from a metre. Right, so I've left it open because we need this. I've got to that, I just did that little bit on the corner and I've left it now. So we've got these long strings here. And I'm going to show you how to put it together. So it matches up with the others. Remember when we did when we joined them. Okay, so now we've got this long one and I'm going to fold it back. I've made a finger crease, but you can iron it if you want to. I've just done it by fingers. Line up this nicely so it sits. And I'm going to lay it on, and I'm going to leave a little gap, about an eighth, just there, like that. You see that little gap? Now, this is all going to get in the way. So what I do is I lift it up over there. I'm getting hold of this, and I'm going to just lay it down. Just lay it down. And I'm going to open it up. Laid down and opened up. I've got this one that we folded 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to pull that across, and I'm going to get that line that I made exactly on that line that runs down the middle. You see that? So that's neatly lined up. That's why we need to get our quilt out the way. It's neatly lined up. See that? Now I'm going to open this up. And I'm going to get that line matched up with the line of the other piece. It's the fold, isn't it? And I made a crease. There's the crease that I made on the top one, and I've got it lined up. So all those creases are lined up. I'm now going to sew. Do you remember how we did it when we did the binding before? I'm now going to sew corner to corner. Simple as. Simple as. You can watch this back. That's the joy with the video. There it is. The creases all match up. Yeah? Now, if I show you what's going to happen when we sew that, we're going to have made that join that we did last time. So I'm going to go down, and with my sewing machine, I'm going to sew across there. I'm going to sew across there where I've pinned, and I'm going to sew this up to there. And then I'll come back when it's still like this and we'll have a look. So I brought that bit down. I lined all the lines up. Do you remember? Hopefully you did too. Those lines and those lines. We made 2 lines. Line there and a line there. And I've sewn across. I hope it's right. I can check it. Right side, right side. Obviously 2 right sides there, and it fits. So I'm going to trim this off now. Oh, I've only got small scissors here. I'll do it with that. Oh, that's all I had left. Pull it. I'm going to press that seam open as I did the last one. Remember? And I'm going to you see that seam is exactly the same as the others now, and it fits without a bulky seam. So I'm going to sew that last bit on the machine because it will match the rest of it, and then I'll be back. And so here we are. It's quite hard for me to find which seam it is that I've just done, because it's the same as all the others. You know, it's those seams that are spread, and it looks so nice. And it's the same with this one. Here we have it here, coming up and there. And the way I did it, it fits nicely. I have done it all on the machine. And what I've done is, I've pressed, well, I've just put the iron on, you know, that's what we do. We don't iron, we don't go back and forth. It will distort the fabric. We just put the iron on, we press it, because we want to set the stitches. We want them to be flat and married to the fabric, if you like, before we do the next bit. And that's the same with all of the quilting. When we just lightly press, we just set those stitches. So I'm going to show you in the next part. There's a little thread there. If you see any loose threads, cut them off. I'm going to show you in the next part what we do with this binding. It seems pretty obvious, But what we do is we fold it to the back. We've got a lovely neat edge there, no raw edges. And we sew it down. And even if I made the whole thing on the machine, I know some people like to machine that down, it makes a neat edge, but I like to hand sew it, always. I don't think I've ever. And we can just cover up that line of stitches because I've kept a little bit in, and so that binding is full, if you see what I mean. So that's it for this video. All we've got left to do is to sew the binding and do the label. So that I'm going to make for my next video. It'll be the last one, and I hope you'll have enjoyed the series. Thank you so much for all your lovely comments. They've really spurred me on. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.